The widowed doctor learned to braid hair with shaking hands to care for his adopted daughters. Years later, during his hospital stay, what these 8 girls did made every nurse cry. James Wilson's hands shook as he pulled weeds from his garden. The morning dew soaked through the knees of his khaki pants, but he didn't mind. At 65, his joints protested the morning ritual, but the routine kept him going. Had to keep going. The sun barely peeked over his suburban home's roofline. The same home where he'd raised his own kids. The same home where Sarah had died 5 years ago. Now it was just him and the flowers she'd planted. Damn arthritis, he muttered, flexing his fingers. The morning air bit cold, making his hands stiffer than usual. The golden retriever next to him lifted his head. I'm fine, Max. Just talking to myself again. The dog had been Sarah's idea. You'll need company, she'd said from her hospital bed. She'd been right, as usual. Inside, the house echoed with his footsteps. The kitchen clock reads 7:15 a.m. Time for breakfast, then his weekly visit to the children's shelter. James cracked 2 eggs into a pan, just like every morning. 1 plate, 1 fork, 1 cup of coffee. You should get out more, his daughter Jenny had said during their monthly phone call yesterday. Join a senior club or something. James hadn't bothered responding. They both knew he wouldn't. He showered, dressed in clean slacks and a button-down shirt, and grabbed his old medical bag. Force of habit? Really? He wasn't licensed to practice anymore, but the shelter liked having a retired pediatric in around for basic checkups. The drive to Hope Haven Children's Shelter took exactly 12 minutes. James knew every turn, every pothole, every traffic light. The building itself hadn't changed in 20 years. Same faded brick exterior, same creaky metal gate, same worn playground equipment in the side yard. Mrs. Thompson met him at the door, her face more lined with worry than usual. Thank goodness you're here, Dr. Wilson. We got 8 new ones. 8. James followed her through the familiar hallways. Children's artwork covered the walls, bright splashes of crayon and paint trying to hide the institutional feel. Sisters. Car accident 3 months ago. Parents didn't make it. Mrs. Thompson's voice dropped. We're having trouble placing them together. That's the problem. Nobody wants to take all 8. Systems pushing to separate them, but... She shook her head. The examination room was really just a converted office. James set his bag down on the desk just as the first girl walked in. Jasmine, according to the file. 16 years old, the oldest of the 8. She stood ramrod straight, arms crossed, eyes suspicious. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Her school uniform wrinkle-free despite the shelter's basic laundry facilities. Hello, Jasmine. I'm Dr. Wilson. James kept his voice gentle, professional. Just a routine checkup today. My sisters go where I go. The words came out like a challenge. Of course. Would you like them here while I examine you? Surprise flickered across her face, quickly hidden. She nodded. One by one, the other sisters filed in. James noted their ages. Tamara, 14. Twins Aisha and Alicia, 12. Destiny, 10. Brianna, 9. Maya, 7. And little Zoe, 6. They moved like a unit, the younger ones naturally gravitating toward Jasmine. As James went through the basic examinations, height, weight, heart rate, reflexes, he couldn't help noticing how they watched out for each other. Jasmine helped Zoe onto the examination table. Tamara whispered reassurances to Maya when the stethoscope felt too cold. The twins held hands. Through the thin walls, voices carried from the hallway. 8 of them? That's too many. And they're all, you know. It would be different in our neighborhood. Maybe if they separated them. James saw Jasmine's jaw tighten. She'd heard too. The examinations took over an hour. All 8 girls were healthy, though a bit underweight. James made notes about vitamin supplements, about Destiny's mild asthma, about Maya's need for glasses. Thank you, Dr. Wilson, Jasmine said formally, shepherding her sisters toward the door. Wait. James surprised himself by speaking. Would you like to hear about my garden? The random question caught them off guard. Even Jasmine's protective mask slipped a bit. I grow vegetables, he continued, not sure why he was still talking. The tomatoes are coming in nicely. And the strawberries? I like strawberries, Zoe piped up, earning a quick look from Jasmine. Me too, James smiled. Maybe next week I could bring some. The drive home felt longer than usual. James's hands gripped the steering wheel too tight, his mind racing. The empty house waited ahead, silent except for Max's greeting bark. He walked through the rooms, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, den, office, living room, kitchen. Too much space for one person. Always too much space since Sarah died. In his office, James opened his laptop. The adoption agency website stared back at him. His cursor hovered over the Begin Application button. "I must be crazy," he muttered. Max rested his head on James's knee, brown eyes questioning. "What do you think, boy? Think we could handle 8 more?" The dog's tail wagged once, twice. James clicked the button. Outside, the garden waited in the fading light. Sarah's flowers swayed in the evening breeze. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked away the silence. James flexed his arthritic fingers and began to type. The following Tuesday, James brought strawberries. Fresh ones, from the grocery store since his weren't ripe yet. He watched the girls eat them during their break time, sitting in a tight circle in the shelter's small courtyard. "These are really good," Zoe said, juice staining her fingers red. "Better than the ones at lunch." "Don't talk with your mouth full," Jasmine reminded her, but without heat. She sat slightly apart from the others, watching. Always watching. James noticed how she made sure everyone else ate first. How she kept count of the strawberries, making sure they were divided equally. How her eyes tracked every adult who walked past, body tensing slightly each time. Mrs. Thompson appeared at his elbow. "They don't usually warm up to anyone this quickly." "I wouldn't call this warming up," James said, noting how Tamara, the second oldest, kept glancing his way with barely concealed suspicion. "Trust me, this is progress." Yesterday, Jasmine actually asked when you'd be coming back. The twins, Aisha and Alicia, were playing some sort of hand-clapping game now. Same face, same hairstyle and matching braids, but James had noticed differences. Aisha bit her lip when concentrating. Alicia talked with her hands. Aisha preferred fruit. Alicia loved anything with chocolate. Dr. Wilson. It was Destiny, the 10-year-old. She stood before him, holding her chest. "My breathing feels funny." James recognized the start of an asthma attack. "Where's your inhaler?" In our room," she wheezed. Before he could move, Jasmine was there, inhaler in hand. She'd obviously been watching, ready, always ready. "Here, let me," James said gently. He helped Destiny time her breaths with the inhaler. "Good girl." Nice and slow. The other sisters had gathered around, forming a protective circle. Brianna, the quiet 9-year-old, held Destiny's hand. Maya, 7 years old and already showing signs of nearsightedness, pressed close to Tamara's side. "Better?" James asked after a few minutes. Destiny nodded. "Thank you." She looked up at Jasmine. "I'm okay." "Jazz? Really?" Jasmine's shoulders relaxed slightly, but her eyes stayed on James. "Evaluating. Assessing. You were a doctor?" Maya asked, pushing her glasses up her nose. "A pediatric EN. I worked with children. Like us?" "Yes. Like you." "Why'd you stop?" James felt Jasmine's gaze sharpen. "I retired. Seemed like the right time after my wife passed." Something flickered across Jasmine's face. Recognition? Maybe. Understanding. What was her name? The question came from Alicia, or was it Aisha? "Sarah. She was a teacher. Our mom was a teacher too," Brianna said softly. It was the first time he'd heard her speak. Silence fell. The kind of heavy silence that follows memories of the lost. "Tell us about her," Zoe asked, climbing into Jasmine's lap. "About your Sarah." James saw Mrs. Thompson start to intervene, probably thinking the topic too sensitive. He shook his head slightly. "She loved flowers," he said. "Planted them everywhere in our garden. Used to say a home needs growing things." He paused. "She would have liked you all." "How do you know?" Tamara challenged, but there was more curiosity than hostility in her tone. "Because she always rooted for families to stay together. She had 3 sisters of her own, you see." Later that afternoon, James overheard 2 potential adoptive couples talking with Mrs. Thompson. "Maybe just the younger ones. We could take 2, possibly 3. The teenagers might be too set in their ways." He watched Jasmine pretend not to hear as she helped Zoe with her reading. Watched her hands shake slightly as she turned the pages. During that day's checkup, James noticed things. How Tamara had memorized everyone's medical details. How the twins tag-teamed keeping Maya entertained. How Brianna always made sure Zoe had a snack. How Destiny drew pictures for whoever was feeling sad. Your heart's beating fast, he told Jasmine during her examination. I'm fine. Are you sleeping? A pause. Enough. And eating. The little ones need it more. That's not what I asked. Their eyes met. For a moment, just a moment, her guard dropped. He saw the exhaustion there. The fear. The weight of 7 sisters on 16-year-old shoulders. I can't let them split us up, she whispered. I promised Mom and Dad. Last thing I promised them. Before James could respond, shouting erupted from the hallway. Zoe had fallen, scraped her knee. The sisters moved as one. Jasmine to assess the damage, Tamara to get the first aid kit, the twins to distract with silly faces, Brianna to hold her hand, Destiny to fetch a juice box, Maya to retrieve Zoe's favorite stuffed animal. James watched them work together, 8 parts of a whole. That evening, he sat in his home office again, adoption application open on his screen. The house creaked around him, too big, too empty. Max dozed at his feet. His phone buzzed. A text from his son Michael. Dad, heard rumors you're at the shelter a lot. Please tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking. Another buzz. His daughter Jenny called Mrs. Thompson. Dad, this is crazy. You're 65. James looked at the application form, cursor blinking in the number of children field. 8. 8 children. 8 black children. 8 sisters who moved like planets in their own solar system, gravitating around each other, protecting each other. His arthritic fingers shook as he began to type. Name, James Wilson. Age, 65. Status, widowed. Occupation, retired pediatric. EN. Number of bedrooms, 5. Number of children interested in adopting, 8. He thought about Jasmine's tired eyes. Tamara's suspicious glances. The twins' synchronized movements. Destiny's wheezy breathing. Brianna's quiet watchfulness. Maya's squinting. Zoe's scraped knee. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it. In the garden, Sarah's flowers swayed in the evening breeze. Growing things, she'd said. A home needs growing things. James hit submit. Behind him, Max's tail thumped against the floor. Once, twice. Like a heartbeat. Like a beginning. The social worker's office felt too small. James sat straight-backed in an uncomfortable chair, aware of every creak, every tick of the wall clock, every shuffle of papers across the desk. Mr. Wilson, Ms. Martinez said, looking up from his application. This is unusual. I'm aware. 8 children is a lot for any family, let alone a single parent. Let alone. She paused. A senior citizen. James supplied. A white man wanting to adopt black children. Ms. Martinez's lips tightened. We have to consider all factors. Your age is a significant concern. The cultural difference is even more so. I've raised 3 children. I was a pediatrician for 40 years. Raising 8 traumatized girls is different from treating patients. She shuffled more papers. Your financial statement is solid, I'll grant you that. But the ongoing costs. The door burst open. Jenny, his daughter, stormed in with Michael right behind her. Dad, this is to stop. Jenny's face was flushed. Mrs. Thompson called us. We're listed as your emergency contacts. You can't be serious about this, Michael added. 8 kids? At your age? James kept his voice steady. I don't recall inviting either of you to this meeting. Mr. Wilson, Ms. Martinez interjected. Perhaps we should reschedule. No. James stood up. His hands shook. But not from arthritis this time. Jenny, Michael, wait outside. This is my meeting. Dad, outside. Something in his tone made them pause. Maybe they saw something in his face they hadn't seen since Sarah died. They left, Jenny's heels clicking sharply against the floor. James sat back down. My wife died 5 years ago. My children have their own lives. I have a 5-bedroom house that's too quiet, a pension that's more than adequate, and 40 years of experience caring for children. He met Ms. Martinez's eyes. But that's not why I'm here. Why are you here, Mr. Wilson? Because 8 sisters need a home. Together. And I can give them one. The home inspection came next. James spent 3 days cleaning, organizing, fixing things he'd let slide. The garden bloomed with Sarah's flowers, bright spots of color against the green. Mrs. Peterson from next door watched him work. Heard rumors, she called over the fence. About those children from the shelter. The black ones. James kept weeding. Their names are Jasmine, Tamara, Aisha, Alicia, Destiny, Brianna, Maya, and Zoe. 8 of them? Here. In this neighborhood. He looked up then. Mrs. Peterson took a step back. Yes, he said simply. Here. The inspector arrived promptly at 9 a.m. She checked every room, every smoke detector, every lock. Made notes about the stairs, the pool fence, the medicine cabinet. You'll need more beds, she said. Already ordered. More security features. Being installed next week. The pool is being filled in. I scheduled it yesterday. She made another note. Your arthritis doesn't prevent me from caring for children. That afternoon, during his shelter visit, James noticed Jasmine watching him more intently than usual. You look tired, she said abruptly. Home inspection today. Her hand froze in the middle of braiding Zoe's hair. For what? James met her eyes. You know what? The other sisters stopped what they were doing. 8 pairs of eyes fixed on him. You're the one? Tamara asked. The one Mrs. Thompson said was interested. If you'll have me. Silence. Then Zoe spoke up. Will we have our own rooms? You'll share 2 to a room. But each of you will have your own bed, your own space. What about school? Destiny asked. Same one you're in now. I checked. We're in district. Your neighbors. Jasmine started. We'll deal with it. Yo kids. We'll deal with it. You're white, she said finally. Yes. And old. Also yes. Jasmine's hands resumed braiding, but slower now. Thinking. Why? The question came from Brianna, quiet as always. James thought about Sarah, about empty rooms and silent breakfasts, about 8 sisters who moved like a solar system. Because families belong together. The next weeks blurred into a parade of interviews, paperwork, background checks. James's phone rang constantly. His children, lawyers, social workers, neighbors. Have you thought this through? Jenny demanded during Sunday dinner. You'll burn through your savings, Michael warned. The neighborhood's talking, his youngest, Lisa, added. James butted his roll. Good. The final approval meeting filled Ms. Martinez's small office. Mrs. Thompson sat in one corner, the children's court advocate in another. James's lawyer shuffled papers beside him. We have concerns, Ms. Martinez began. List them, James said. Age, cultural differences, the number of children, the financial burden, the neighborhood dynamics, your own children's objections. And despite all that, she sighed. Your home inspection passed. Your financials are solid. Your background check is clean. The girl's current school is within walking distance. You have relevant childcare experience. She looked at her notes. And most importantly, you're the only applicant willing to take all 8 sisters. James's hands shook as he signed the preliminary papers. That afternoon, he brought more strawberries to the shelter. The sisters sat in their usual circle in the courtyard. So, he said, setting down the container. So, Jasmine echoed. The papers are filed. If you want. Zoe launched herself at his legs. Can I bring my teddy bear? Of course. My books? Maya asked. All of them. One by one, the sisters added their questions. Tamara about the kitchen. The twins about sharing rooms, Destiny about her asthma medication. Brianna about the garden. Finally, only Jasmine remained silent. You don't have to decide now, James told her. She looked at her sisters, at Zoe hugging his legs, at Maya listing her books, at the twins whispering together, at Destiny breathing easier, at Brianna's small smile. When? She asked finally. 2 weeks. If you want. Jasmine stood up, straight and tall like that first day in the examination room. She looked him in the eye. 2 weeks, she said. Back home, James walked through the empty rooms one last time. Sarah's flowers bloomed in the garden. Max followed him, tail wagging. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. 2 weeks. Moving day brought chaos in 8 different sizes. James stood in his driveway, watching the sisters pile out of Mrs. Thompson's van. Each girl carried a trash bag full of belongings, everything they owned in the world. This is really your house? Zoe asked, neck craned back to see the roof. Our house now, James corrected. His hands shook as he unlocked the front door. If you want it to be. They entered like a cautious wave, Jasmine first, scanning everything, then Tamara shepherding the younger ones. The twins stuck together, as always. Destiny gripped her inhaler. Brianna held Maya's hand. Zoe clutched her teddy bear. Kitchen's through there, James pointed. Bathrooms upstairs and down. 4 bedrooms upstairs. 1 down here. That's mine. You can choose your rooms, but we know how to share, Jasmine cut in. She still hadn't relaxed her shoulders. Max trotted out to investigate, tail wagging. Zoe squealed and hid behind Tamara. That's just Max, James said. He's friendly. We've never had a dog, Maya whispered. Well, now you do. The next hour was a blur of footsteps, questions, discoveries. James heard doors opening, closing, voices calling room dibs. He stayed downstairs, giving them space to explore, to claim territory. Dr. Wilson. It was Destiny. I mean, what should we call you? James's throat tightened. Whatever you're comfortable with. She nodded, disappeared upstairs again. He heard her whispering to the others. The first crisis hit at bedtime. Zoe's hair needed braiding for school tomorrow, and James's arthritic fingers fumbled with the tiny elastic bands. Here, let me. Jasmine reached for her sister's hair. No, James said firmly. You're not the parent anymore. I am. I just need to learn. Jasmine's hand froze mid-reach. Something flashed in her eyes. Relief? Fear? Both. Like this, she said finally, demonstrating the parting technique. Small sections. Keep it tight but not too tight. James's fingers shook, but he followed her instructions. It took 4 to 5 minutes to do what Jasmine could finish in 10. But when he finished, Zoe had passable braids. They're a little crooked, she said, examining herself in the bathroom mirror. I'll do better tomorrow, James promised. That night, the house creaked with new sounds. 8 different breathing patterns. Footsteps to the bathroom. Whispered conversations. At midnight, a scream. James found Zoe thrashing in her bed, tears streaming. Destiny sat beside her, using her inhaler, anxiety attack. Bad dream, Brianna explained from the next bed. She gets them. James sat on Zoe's bed, uncertain. Want to talk about it? Mom and Dad, she sobbed. The car. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement. When she didn't pull away, he gathered her into his arms. Her tears soaked his pajama shirt. I'm here, he murmured. You're safe. Destiny's breathing steadied. Brianna watched with wide eyes. In the doorway, Jasmine stood silent guard. Morning brought new challenges. 8 different breakfast preferences. 8 lunchboxes to pack. 8 schedules to coordinate. I can walk them to school, Jasmine offered. No, I'll drive you. All of you. We don't need. I know you don't need it. I want to. The school drop-off line moved slowly. James saw other parents staring. Heard whispers behind hands. Felt Jasmine's tension beside him in the passenger seat. Ignore them, he said quietly. I always do. That afternoon, he took them shopping. 8 pairs of shoes. 8 sets of school supplies. 8 new backpacks to replace the worn ones. At the register, his credit card sparked murmurs. Such a blessing, the cashier said too loudly. Taking in those poor children. James felt Jasmine stiffen beside him. I'm the lucky one, he said clearly, meeting the cashier's eyes until she looked away. Home again. The twins disappeared upstairs with their new things. Destiny helped Maya organize her school supplies. Brianna showed Zoe how to write her name on her folders. James found Jasmine in the kitchen, staring at the refrigerator. Too much food, she said. It's enough. We don't need. You do need it. You're growing. All of you? She turned to face him. Why are you doing this? You know why. No, I don't. Nobody does this. Nobody wants 8 kids. Nobody wants. She gestured at herself. I do. Why? James's hands shook as he opened a cabinet, pulled out 8 different cups. Because you deserve it. Because you belong together. Because this house was too empty. Because I was too empty. He set the cups down. Pick whichever reason you want. That night, after dinner, 8 different opinions on vegetables. After homework, 8 different subjects. After showers, 8 different water temperatures. James sat in his office. His phone showed missed calls from Jenny, Michael, Lisa. Text messages from neighbors. Emails from the school. A knock at his door. Tamara stood there, holding Zoe's hand. She wants a good night hug, Tamara said, like she was asking permission for something dangerous. If that's okay. James opened his arms. Zoe ran to him. Your braids are crooked, she mumbled into his shirt. I'll do better tomorrow, he promised again. Later, checking on them before bed, he found all 8 sisters crammed into one room, sleeping bags on the floor. Just for tonight, Jasmine said from her position by the door. They're adjusting. The rooms aren't going anywhere, James said. Take the time you need. He went downstairs, made himself tea with shaking hands. Max laid his head on James's knee. Big day, boy, he muttered. The dog's tail thumped against the floor. Once, twice. Upstairs, 8 different breathing patterns settled into sleep. The house creaked, adjusting to its new fullness. In the kitchen, 8 different cups sat drying by the sink. James flexed his fingers, practicing braiding motions. Tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow, he'd do better. He had to. They all did. The school registration office smelled like old coffee and printer paper. James sat straight-backed in another uncomfortable chair, 8 folders spread across the administrator's desk. Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Hartley peered at him over her glasses. This is irregular, so I've been told. His hands stayed steady on the armrest. He'd gotten used to this conversation. 8 new students, all at once. Oh! She glanced at the girls waiting in the hallway. My daughters, James said firmly. Mrs. Hartley's lips thinned. We'll need to evaluate their academic levels. Ensure proper placement. They've been attending Riverside Elementary and Middle School. Their records, that's a very different district, Mr. Wilson. Through the office window, James watched Jasmine straighten Maya's collar, check Destiny's inhaler, separate the twins from a brewing argument. Always managing, always monitoring. Their records, he repeated, show they are all performing at or above grade level. Jasmine's taking AP classes. Our AP program is quite rigorous. She can handle it. And the youngest ones? Mrs. Hartley shuffled papers. We have limited ESL resources. James's chair scraped back. They were born in Connecticut. English is their first and only language. Are we done here? In the hallway, 8 faces turned to him. Jasmine's jaw was set. She'd heard everything. Well, Tamara asked. You start Monday. The drive home was quiet. In the rearview mirror, James saw Zoe lean against Brianna, saw the twins holding hands, saw Maya squinting at her book despite her new glasses. His phone buzzed. A text from his bank. Alert. Large withdrawal processed. 8 sets of school supplies. 8 new uniforms, 8 pairs of shoes. Registration fees. Activity fees. Technology fees. The numbers kept climbing. At home, James walked to his garage. 3 classic cars sat under dust covers, his retirement hobby. The Mustang, the Corvette, the Thunderbird. Sarah had called them his midlife crisis collection. He picked up his phone, made some calls. That afternoon, car transporters arrived. The neighbors watched from their windows as James's cars rolled away, one by one. Mrs. Peterson appeared at the fence. Selling your babies, James. They're just cars. First the pool, now this. Those children are costing you. He turned to face her. Those children are worth it. Inside, he found Jasmine at the kitchen table, staring at a math worksheet. Advanced calculus. Her knuckles were white around her pencil. Need help? I'm fine. Jasmine. She looked up, eyes too bright. I can handle it. I know you can. But you don't have to handle it alone. Before she could answer, shouting erupted upstairs. They found the twins in their room, throwing clothes at each other. I had it first. It's mine. Hey. James's voice cut through the chaos. What's going on? Alicia took my sweater. It's my sweater. James looked between them, identical faces, identical anger. He couldn't tell who was who. Both of you, sit. His doctor voice, firm but calm. They sat. Now, one at a time. It took 20 minutes to sort out the sweater situation. By then, Destiny was wheezing from the excitement. Maya had lost her glasses, and Zoe was crying because someone had moved her teddy bear. James's phone buzzed again. His lawyer this time. Your children called, she said without preamble. They're concerned about your mental capacity. Talking about power of attorney. James watched Jasmine help Destiny with her inhaler. Watched Tamara find Maya's glasses under the bed. Watched Brianna return Zoe's bear. Let them try, he said, and hung up. That night, The neighborhood association letter arrived. Complaints about noise, about property values, about changing demographics. James fed it into the shredder. Dinner was pasta. 8 different opinions on sauce. James's hands shook as he served plates, his arthritis flaring from the day's stress. I can do that, Tamara offered. No. Sit. Eat. After dinner, homework spread across the living room like a paper explosion. Math, English, science, history. 8 different subjects, 8 different grade levels. Your capital letters are sloppy, James told Zoe, looking at her handwriting practice. Like your braids, she shot back, but she was smiling. His phone buzzed. Jenny this time. Dad, this has to stop. The cars? Your savings? What are you doing? Being a father. You're already a father. To us. Yes, he said. I am. He hung up, turned to find Jasmine in the doorway. We're too much trouble, she said quietly. No. We heard Mrs. Peterson. About the cars. About everything. Jasmine, you can't spend all your money on us. Your kids are right. This is crazy. James stood up. His hands were steady now. Come with me. He led her to the garage, flipped on the lights. Empty spaces where the cars had been. See those? He pointed to the vacant spots. Just metal and paint. But you. He turned to face her. You and your sisters are flesh and blood and heart and future. No comparison. But, no buts. Not about this. Not ever about this. Upstairs, a crash followed by tears. Probably Maya bumping into something again, even with her new glasses. Jasmine moved automatically toward the stairs. I'll go, James said. But, you're 16. Be 16. He found Maya in the hallway, a broken vase at her feet. She looked terrified. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll be more careful. James knelt beside her, careful of the ceramic shards. Are you hurt? She shook her head. Then nothing else matters. He smiled. Help me clean up. Later, after bandaging Maya's small cut, she had been hurt, just hiding it. After breaking up another twin argument, after checking Destiny's breathing, after reading to Zoe, after making sure Brianna actually ate dinner, she tended to skip when stressed. James sat in his office. His phone showed more missed calls, more texts, more emails. The neighborhood association letter sat in shreds in his trash can. His hands ached from the day's activities. A small knock. Brianna this time. Can't sleep? She shook her head, handed him a piece of paper. A drawing. 8 stick figures and one tall one, standing in front of a house. A dog too. All scribbles and smile. It's us, she whispered. James's vision blurred. Yes, it's us. James sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair in the community center, surrounded by other adoptive parents. The flyer had read cultural sensitivity training for transracial adoptive families. He was the only single father in the room. Your children's hair isn't just hair, the instructor, Ms. Davis, explained. It's identity, culture, history. James's fingers twitched, remembering that morning struggle with Zoe's braids. Still crooked, but getting better. You need to learn, Ms. Davis continued. Not just the mechanics, but the meaning. After class, she approached him. 8 girls, right? I heard about you. News travels fast. In our community, lightning fast. She handed him a card. My salon. Bring them in. We'll teach you properly. At home, he found the kitchen in chaos. Tamara had tried to cook dinner. I know how, she insisted, smoke alarm blaring. Used to do it all the time. Not anymore, James said, opening windows. That's my job now. But your job is homework. Being 14, he surveyed the burned attempts at stir-fry. How about pizza? 8 faces lit up. Later, after pizza, 8 different topping preferences. James gathered them in the living room. We need traditions, he announced. Our own. Like what? Maya asked, squinting through her glasses. Like Friday movie nights. Sunday dinners. Whatever we want. Our old traditions weren't good enough. Jasmine's voice had an edge. No, that's not. James stopped, started over. Tell me about your old traditions. Silence. Then Brianna spoke up. Mom used to sing. Every night. Dad told jokes at dinner, Destiny added. Really bad ones. We had dance parties, Alicia said. Remember? Aisha. One by one, The memories spilled out. James listened, memorizing each one. "We can keep those," he said finally. "And make new ones too." Both. The next morning, James took them to Ms. Davis's salon. The bell chimed as they entered, 8 girls and one nervous father with shaking hands. "Well," Ms. Davis smiled, "look what we have here." 4 hours later, James's fingers were cramping from practice on mannequin heads, but he could do a decent cornrow. "Not bad," Ms. Davis approved. For a beginner, Jasmine watched him work, her expression unreadable. That afternoon, they took their first family photo. James set up the timer, herded everyone onto the couch. Max sat front and center, tail wagging. "Wait," Zoe said just before the flash. She ran to James, climbed into his lap. The picture caught them all mid-laugh at her antics. October brought their first holiday together, Halloween. 8 different costume requests. 8 different candy preferences. 8 different levels of excitement. "I'm too old for trick-or-treating," Jasmine declared. "Okay," James said. "Help me hand out candy instead." She did. Together they watched her sisters parade up and down the street. Tamara as a doctor, like you used to be. The twins as salt and pepper shakers. Destiny as an astronaut. Brianna as a butterfly. Maya as a librarian. Zoe as a princess. "They look happy," Jasmine said quietly. "Are you?" She didn't answer. The next morning, James found Zoe trying to sort her candy. "Dad," she said, then froze. They both did. It was the first time any of them had called him that. James's hands shook as he helped her organize her chocolate bars. School conferences came next. 8 different teachers, 8 different reports. "Jasmine's work is slipping," her AP calculus teacher said. "She seems distracted." "The twins are inseparable," their teacher reported. "Maybe too much so." Destiny's asthma affects her PE participation. Maya needs to sit closer to the front. Brianna's so quiet. We sometimes forget she's there. Zoe's adjusting well, but she cries sometimes during story hour. James took notes, made appointments, ordered new glasses for Maya, researched asthma-friendly exercises for Destiny, found a math tutor for Jasmine, who refused to go, bought identical notebooks for the twins, who refused to share. His phone buzzed less these days. His children had stopped calling as much. The neighbors had found new things to gossip about. The school had moved on to other concerns. But the house had come alive. Music from the twins' room. They'd started a band. God help them all. The smell of cookies. Tamara had graduated from burned stir-fry to decent baking. Laughter from the backyard. Destiny teaching Zoe cartwheels while Brianna kept score. Maya's books everywhere, multiplying like rabbits. And Jasmine watching it all, her guard lowering inch by invisible inch. One night, James found her in the kitchen after everyone else was asleep. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Studying. AP test tomorrow." He made them both hot chocolate. They sat at the counter, quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. "Tell me about them," James said. "Your parents." Jasmine stared into her mug. "Dad was funny. Like, really funny. Mom was smart. She taught 3rd grade. She swallowed. They would have liked you." "I hope so. They were good parents." "I know. I miss them." "I know that too." She looked up at him. "Does it get easier?" "Missing people." James thought of Sarah. "Not easier. Different." Jasmine nodded. Then, surprising them both, she leaned against his shoulder. Just for a moment. The next day, James hung Brianna's family drawing in his office. 8 stick figures, 1 tall one, and a scribbly dog. Their first family portrait. His hands still shook sometimes, but differently now. Not from arthritis or anxiety, but from the weight of braiding hair, wiping tears, holding hands, carrying dreams that night. After dinner, 8 different vegetables, but they were working on it. After homework, 8 different subjects, but they had a system now. After showers, 8 different water temperatures, but the hot water heater was handling it. James sat in his office. A knock at his door. All 8 girls stood there, Zoe in front holding something. "We had a vote," she announced. "Oh." She thrust a paper at him. A new drawing, this time with labels under each stick figure. "Dad," it said under the tall one. James's hands shook as he hung it next to the first one. "Different, not easier. Better." The kitchen clock read 2:17 a.m. when James heard the crash. He found Jasmine in the living room, surrounded by scattered papers, textbooks, and a knocked-over lamp. "I can't do it," she said before he could speak. I can't understand any of it." Her AP calculus textbook lay open, pages crumpled. Practice tests spread across the floor like fallen leaves. "The exam's in 6 hours," she continued, voice cracking. "And I don't." James picked up the lamp, switched it on. "Start at the beginning. There's no time. There's 6 hours. Start at the beginning." He sat on the floor beside her, ignoring his protesting joints. Picked up the practice test she'd been working on. "Integration by parts," he read. "Okay. Show me where you're stuck." "Everything." "Nowhere." "I don't know." Her hands trembled as she gripped her pencil. "I used to be good at this." "You still are?" "No, I'm not. I can't focus. I can't think. She swallowed hard. "I keep thinking about them. Mom and Dad. What if I fail? What if I let them down? What if—" "Jasmine." James kept his voice soft. "One problem at a time. Just like we do everything else. Show me the first question you can't solve." She pointed to a problem. James read it, nodded. "Okay, let's break it down." They worked through the night. One problem at a time. James made coffee at 3 a.m. More coffee at 4 a.m. His hands shook from caffeine and arthritis as he helped her organize her notes. "You're good at this," Jasmine said during a break. "Teaching. I had practice. Medical students, residents. Must have been easier than calculus." "Different. Not easier." She almost smiled at that. At 5 a.m., Tamara found them. "Jazz? What are you?" She saw the books, the papers, her sister's exhausted face. Without a word, she went to the kitchen. Came back with more coffee and Pop-Tarts. "You have school too," James told her. "Go back to bed." "Family studies together," Tamara said firmly, sitting down. One by one, the others woke. Found them. Joined them. The twins quizzed Jasmine on formulas. Destiny fetched water and snacks. Brianna organized the practice tests by difficulty. Maya, barely awake, leaned against James's shoulder. Zoe curled up with Max on the couch, watching. "You don't all have to," Jasmine started. "Shut up and solve for X," Aisha interrupted. At 7 a.m., James drove Jasmine to school. The others had gone back to bed. They'd wake up late, be tardy, but some things mattered more. "What if I fail?" Jasmine whispered as they pulled up to the building. "Then you take it again." "But, no buts. You're more than a test score." She gripped her backpack. "Mom and Dad would be proud of you. Already are proud of you." James turned to face her. "Just like I am." Jasmine's breath caught. For a moment, she looked like the 16-year-old she was, not the surrogate mother she'd been forced to become. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know. Do it scared." She nodded once, opened the car door. "Jasmine." She turned back. "I love you." The words hung in the morning air. James hadn't planned them, hadn't meant to say them, but they were true. Jasmine's eyes filled. She grabbed her backpack and ran into the school. The house was quiet when James returned. He let the others sleep, called the schools to explain their tardiness. "Family emergency," he said. Not entirely a lie. His phone buzzed. "Jenny. Dad? We've been talking. Me and Michael and Lisa. About everything. The girls. The money. The house." She paused. "We saw the family photos you sent." James waited. "They look happy," Jenny said finally. "They are. Most days." "And you?" James thought about the night's calculus crisis. About 8 different types of coffee mugs. About crooked braids and scattered papers and family study sessions at 5 a.m. "I am," he said. "Most days." Another pause. "We've been wrong, haven't we?" "Yes. I'd like to meet them. Properly. If that's okay." James's hands shook as he poured another coffee. "Come for Sunday dinner." The others woke gradually, stumbled downstairs in various states of dishevelment. "Is Jasmine okay?" Zoe asked, still in her pajamas. "She's taking her test. Will she pass?" "Maybe. Maybe not." James started making breakfast, 8 different preferences, but he knew them all now. "Either way, we'll handle it. As a family," Brianna asked quietly. As a family, they ate breakfast at noon. James let them stay home. One day wouldn't hurt. They sprawled in the living room, surrounded by the debris of the night's study session. "Dad," Tamara said. Thanks. For helping Jazz. That's what dads do. She nodded. Yeah, that's what good dads do. At 3:45 p.m., they heard Jasmine's key in the lock. They all looked up as she entered. She stood in the doorway, face unreadable. Well, the twins asked in unison. A smile broke across Jasmine's face. I think I did okay. The room exploded. Hugs, cheers, questions all at once. Max barking, caught up in the excitement. Later, after the celebration pizza, 8 different toppings. After showers and homework and regular life resumed, James found Jasmine in the kitchen again. Thank you, she said. For last night. For everything. That's what dads do. I know. She took a deep breath. I love you too. James's hands shook as he pulled her into a hug. She let him. Upstairs, someone started playing music. The twins, probably. Their band was getting better. Or at least louder. Should I tell them to quiet down? Jasmine asked. No, James said. Let them play. They stood in the kitchen, listening to the not-quite music, to Destiny's laugh, to Maya dropping another book, to Brianna's quiet humming, to Zoe's footsteps dancing, to the sounds of home. James didn't remember falling. He remembered reaching for the top shelf in the kitchen, looking for Destiny's spare inhaler. Remembered his arthritic hands shaking. Then nothing. He woke to Jasmine's voice, sharp with fear. Dad? Dad, can you hear me? The kitchen floor was cold against his back. 8 faces hovered above him, blurred then clear. I'm fine, he tried to sit up. Pain shot through his hip. Just lost my balance. Don't move. Tamara's voice, steady like his used to be when treating patients. Aisha called 911. That's not necessary. Shut up, Jasmine said. Her hand gripped his. Just shut up and let us help you. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes. James counted each one, if only to distract himself from the fear in his daughter's eyes. Possible hip fracture, one paramedic said. We'll need to transport him. We're coming too, Jasmine announced. Family only. We are family. She pulled out the adoption papers. She kept copies in the emergency folder James had made. All 8 of us. The paramedic looked at his partner. Shrugged. Take my car. James managed through the pain. The keys. Already have them. Tamara held them up. Maya, grab Dad's medication list from the fridge. Destiny, his insurance cards in his wallet. Brianna, get his phone. Twins, help Zoe with her shoes. They moved like a well-oiled machine. James would have been proud if he wasn't so focused on not passing out. The emergency room wasn't ready for them. 8 girls in the waiting room, moving in formation, answering questions in tag team. Any allergies? The nurse asked. Penicillin and sulfur drugs, Jasmine and Tamara said together. Current medications. Blood pressure pills, arthritis medication, daily aspirin, Maya read from the list. Plus vitamins, previous surgeries. Appendix out in 86, knee replacement in 19. Brianna supplied. Emergency contacts. Us, the twins said. And his other kids. Numbers are in his phone. Which I have, Zoe added, holding it up. The nurse blinked. Looked at her charts. At the girls. Back at her charts. You're all his daughters. Yes, Jasmine said firmly. All of us. X-rays confirmed a hairline fracture. Not severe enough for surgery, but he'd need physical therapy. And help. Lots of help. Someone will need to stay with him, the doctor said. Assist with daily activities. 8 hands shot up. They brought him home the next day. The house had transformed in his absence. Handrails appeared in the bathroom. A temporary bed in the downstairs study. A wheelchair ramp over the front steps. How did you? Mrs. Thompson helped, Jasmine explained. And the neighbors. The neighbors. Mrs. Peterson organized it. Said that's what neighbors do. They had a schedule worked out. Jasmine and Tamara traded morning shifts, helping him dress and prepare for the day. The twins handled meals. Destiny managed his medications with the precision of a pharmacist. Brianna kept track of doctor's appointments. Maya read to him during rest periods. Zoe appointed herself official mood lifter. Your braids are crooked, James told her one morning as she brought him breakfast. Yeah, she grinned. Guess you'll have to get better fast and fix them. His biological children visited more now. Jenny brought casseroles. Michael helped with home modifications. Lisa organized his medical bills. They are amazing, Jenny said, watching the girls work. The way they take care of you. They learn from the best, Lisa added. No, James said. They already knew how. They just needed someone to take care of first. The physical therapist came 3 times a week. All 8 girls attended the first session, taking notes. Okay, the therapist said, looking overwhelmed. Who's going to help with the exercises? Me, they all said. They divided up the tasks. Jasmine supervised morning stretches. Tamara handled afternoon exercises. The twins took evening therapy. The younger ones counted repetitions, offered water, provided encouragement. Your form's sloppy, Jasmine told him during one session, echoing his own words from countless hair-braiding attempts. I'll do better tomorrow, he replied, making her smile. At night, they took turns sleeping on the couch near his temporary bed. Just in case. You don't have to, he started. Shut up, Jasmine said again. It had become her favorite phrase. The hospital staff came for a home health assessment. Found everything perfect. Better than perfect. Quite a support system you have, the nurse commented. James watched Destiny organize his pill box, Maya adjust his reading light, Brianna fluff his pillows, the twins argue over dinner plans, Zoe demonstrate her latest dance moves, all while Jasmine and Tamara supervised. The best, he agreed. Recovery was slow. Some days the pain made him short-tempered. Some days the dependence made him feel useless. Some days he just missed being able to braid hair. It's okay to be frustrated, Jasmine told him during one particularly bad day. You taught us that. When did you get so wise? Must be those good genes you passed on. He laughed, then winced. I didn't pass on any genes to you. No, she agreed. You gave us something better. Weeks passed. James graduated from wheelchair to walker to cane. Each milestone celebrated with 8 different types of enthusiasm. The night he managed to climb the stairs again, he found them all in Jasmine's room. Like that first night, sleeping bags on the floor. Just for tonight, Jasmine said. We're adjusting. James smiled. Take all the time you need. His hands still shook as he gripped the cane. But differently now. Not from weakness or age or arthritis. From love. The next morning, he made breakfast. 8 different preferences. All from memory. 5 years passed like water through fingers. James sat in his garden chair, watching his family spread across the backyard. Sunday dinner, their strongest tradition, still going strong. His hands didn't shake anymore when he braided hair. Practice and physical therapy had strengthened them. Good thing, too. Now he had granddaughter's hair to braid. Jasmine's twins, Sarah and Rachel, toddled through the grass, their own hair in perfect cornrows. His daughter, all of 21 now, had graduated pre-med, started medical school, met a boy who became a man who became their father. Named her first daughter after the grandmother she'd never met. Dad! Tamara called from the grill. Medium rare still. Always. She'd followed her sister into medicine, but chose nursing instead. Better hours, she claimed. More hands-on care. The hospital had hired her straight out of school. The twins, Aisha and Alicia, set up their instruments on the patio. Their band had actually gotten good. Good enough for local gigs, college scholarships for music. Different colleges, finally, they'd learned to be apart. Mostly. Sound check. Alicia called. Not too loud. Destiny warned from her laptop. She was writing her thesis, environmental science, focused on air quality. Her asthma had driven her career choice. Now she helped kids breathe easier. Brianna sat with James, quiet as always. She'd turned that quietness into art. Her photographs hung in galleries now. Simple shots of family life, moments caught in black and white. Love in all its shapes. Maya squinted through her reading glasses. She'd never outgrown that habit. At her lesson plans. 3rd grade, like her first mother. She taught at the same school, too. Kept the connection alive. Zoe, 17 now, practiced dance moves on the lawn. She'd shoot up 5 inches since that first day, all legs and grace. Dance scholarships waited in her future. She'd already picked her school. 5 minutes to food. Tamara announced. The back gate opened. Jenny, Michael, and Lisa arrived with their families. More kids, more noise, more love. They came every Sunday now. No more missed calls, no more angry voicemails. Mrs. Thompson came too, retired but still part of their lives. Even Mrs. Peterson joined sometimes, bringing her famous potato salad, her prejudices long forgotten. James watched them all. His family. Not by blood, but by choice. By love. By the daily work of living and growing together. Picture time. Brianna called. She'd set up her camera on the tripod. Everyone together. They gathered around James's chair. 8 daughters. 3 biological children. 6 grandchildren. 1 dog. Max was old now, gray around the muzzle, but his tail still wagged. Ready? Brianna set the timer. Say, family, exclamation point. The flash caught the mid-laugh, just like that first photo 5 years ago. Later, after dinner, still 8 different preferences, but they'd learned to compromise. After the younger kids were put to bed, after Jenny and Michael and Lisa had gone home, the core 8 sat with James in the living room. Tell us again, Zoe said, leaning against his chair. About the first day. You've heard it 100 times. Tell us anyway. James looked at them. At Jasmine, successful and strong, balancing medical school and motherhood. At Tamara, caring for others like she'd always done, but professionally now. At the twins, different but still connected. At Destiny, breathing freely, helping others do the same. At Brianna, seeing beauty in quiet moments. At Maya, teaching like her mother before her. At Zoe, dancing through life. Well, he began. It started with a fall. Not that part, Jasmine interrupted. The real beginning. James smiled. It started with 8 sisters who needed a home, and a home that needed 8 sisters. And a dad, Zoe added. Don't forget that part. And a dad, he agreed, who needed them more than they ever needed him. That's not true, Brianna said softly, surprising them all. We needed you too. The twins started playing, something soft, sweet. A song they'd written about family. Remember when you sold the cars? Tamara asked. Remember when you learned to braid? Maya laughed. Remember the first Sunday dinner? Destiny added. Remember the hospital? Jasmine said quietly. When you fell. Remember everything, James said. They did. They remembered the hard parts, the neighborhood gossip, the school struggles, the financial worries. The good parts, the first dad, the family photos, the Sunday traditions. The growing parts, learning to trust, to love, to become. Mrs. Martinez came to my graduation, Jasmine said suddenly. Remember? The social worker who tried to stop the adoption. What did she say? Zoe asked. She said she'd never been happier to be wrong. James's hands didn't shake anymore when he reached for them. When he hugged them. When he held his grandchildren. When he braided hair. They'd grown stronger. All of them. Dad? It was Brianna. I found something today. She handed him a folder. Inside, 2 drawings. The first one, 8 stick figures, 1 tall one, a scribbly dog. No labels. The second, the same figures, but with Dad written proudly. I'm doing a gallery show, she said. About family. About choices. About love. These will be the centerpiece. James looked at the drawings. At his daughters. At the life they'd built. Perfect, he said, because it was. Not perfect like a photograph or a painting. Perfect like a family. Perfect in its imperfections. In its daily choices. In its constant growth. Outside, the garden bloomed. Sarah's flowers, kept alive all these years, tended by 8 pairs of hands. Inside, the house breathed with life. 8 different laughs. 8 different dreams, 8 different lives intertwined with his. One more picture, Brianna said, raising her camera. They gathered close. No poses, no planning. Just them. Just family. The shutter clicked. James looked at his hands. Steady now. Strong now. They'd learned to braid hair, wipe tears, hold dreams, build bridges. They'd learned to love in 8 different ways. They'd learned to be a father's hands. Time for bed, he said finally. Big days tomorrow. They had busy lives now, jobs, schools, families of their own. But they still came home. Still gathered. Still belonged. Love you, Dad, they said, one by one, heading out. Love you too, he replied. 8 times. Different each time. Perfect each time. The house settled into night. Through the window, James could see Sarah's flowers silvered by moonlight. Could hear the echo of 8 different laughs. Could feel the weight of 8 different loves. His hands didn't shake as he locked up, turned out lights, headed to bed. They'd grown strong enough to hold this much joy.